Well, we're going to be in John chapter 18, starting at verse 28 today, and we're going to go into John chapter 19, verse 16. So some of you might be thinking, wow, that sounds like a lot. It's not. It's just, the end of one chapter, beginning of another chapter. But we're in a time, as we've been studying through the book of John, where Jesus' trial is taking place the night or the early morning before he is crucified. Last week, we looked at it and we read about Jesus being arrested. We found out that he first was judged by the Jewish leaders, both Caiaphas and Annas. John doesn't talk about this. I think it's Luke that does, that he also appeared before Herod for a little bit. But basically, he spends the first half of his trial standing trial before the Jewish leaders, the leaders that represent the Jewish people, and we saw how they were starting to reject Jesus. It's important for us to realize that in context, because just a few days before that, as Jesus Christ rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, people were worshiping him and praising him that he would be the coming king, that he was the Messiah. And now, a few days later, he is kidnapped basically in the middle of the night, and he has been at an illegal trial. Now, to put it in further context, let's just think about this for a minute as we consider Jesus on trial. Let me ask you a softball question right here. Who is it that's on trial? Yeah, all right, that should have been an easy one for everyone because I just said it 10 times. Who's on trial right now? Jesus. And who is Jesus? I remember being at a Promise Keepers pastors convention a long time ago. And the first two speakers, one speaker was Max Lucado, and he got up and gave a sermon. His sermon was actually just a promotion for the book he had coming out that week. And he had a huge framed picture, a painting of Jesus, right? And if I showed it to you, it's the most common picture painting of Jesus that we have, right? And I remember the next gentleman that got up was someone who was Jewish. And one of the first things he did is he walked up and he pointed at this painting of Jesus and said, "King of the Jews?" King of the Vikings, maybe, but not King of the Jews, right? Blonde hair, blue eyes, looked more like Chris Hemsworth or something. And I just want us to get a picture of who it is we're actually reading about. John started out his Gospels with these words: "In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God." Jumping down to verse 14, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory as the only Son from the Father." Just absolutely incredible words where we're looking at the divinity of Jesus Christ. It's not a clear picture, though. So let me jump to a much clearer picture of who it is that we are reading about. John, the same John who wrote this gospel, when he was a very old man, was on the island of Patmos. And while he was there, a prisoner for the gospel, his friend, Jesus, came to him in a vision. And John describes Jesus Christ. He says this: "I, John, your brother and partner in the tribulation and the kingdom and the patient endurance that are in Jesus, was on the island called Patmos on account of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet saying, 'Write what you see in a book and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea.' So he hears a voice, and then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me. And on turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed in a long robe with a golden sash around his chest, and his hair was like white like wool, like snow. Notice all those likes. He can't quite describe what he's seen. It's not that he's from the Pacific Northwest and uses like uselessly. It's that he can't quite describe humanly what he has seen. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet like burnished bronze refined in a furnace, and his voice was like the roar of many waters. And in his right hand he held 7 stars, and from his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. This is the one we're reading about today. Not a picture of someone who looks remotely like a Viking, not a little bobblehead that some people might have, but the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the Prince of Peace, the Lion of Judah, the Lamb that is about to be slain. And with that, we pick up the words of John with the trial of Jesus as the Jewish leaders are confounded because they're trying to arrest Jesus. They have arrested Jesus illegally. They're trying to get him to admit he's guilty of things he's not guilty of, and so they leave to go to Pilate. Verse 28, we read this. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning, and they themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" And they answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, would we not have delivered him over to you?" And Pilate said to them, "Take him yourself and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken, to show by what kind of death he was going to die. Let's stop there. We have introduced to us for the first time Pilate. And in this, Pilate is a Gentile leader representing the Gentile world of Rome to the people of Jerusalem. He is the man who has authority and power. His position that he had was one that was coveted. It was a wealthy position because of how much trade came through Jerusalem. From the east to the west, the north to the south. It covered different continents the trade routes would go. He was a man who was corrupt. He was given this position by his friend. His friend got this position because he slowly poisoned and killed Caesar's son and came into power that way. Pilate was there, and right off the bat, he tried to flex his muscles and show all of the Jewish people in Jerusalem that he was in charge, that he was the one who represented Caesar. And he did that by having Roman soldiers flood Jerusalem, march around it, go on patrols, and on their shields, they had graven images of Caesar, and on their poles, graven images of Caesar, which to the Jewish religion, that was breaking the law. You're not supposed to have any graven images. And so a revolt took place until the point where Pilate had to back down. He's a man who is there not because he cares about the region. He's there just for political power. He is a man who has a very tense treaty, if you will, with all of the local people. And as these Jewish people come, these Jewish leaders, to Pilate, what are they doing? They wake Pilate up early in the morning. Early in the morning. We know from the other Gospels that it probably wasn't a good night's sleep for Pilate because something was going on with his wife that night. She wasn't sleeping good, and she was having prophetic dreams and visions throughout the night. Wow. He wakes up, and here it is. You can imagine all of these men with their torches being there, a crowd of Jewish leaders and other followers, and they have this man with them who's been beaten. And he asks an important question, like, what did this man do wrong? Notice right off the bat, they're not saying what he did wrong. They instantly start with, would we have brought him to you if he was innocent? Notice everything with the Jews. They're here and they're saying like, man, we've got to get this taken care of before sunrise. Why? Because once the sun rises, we're like into the preparation day for the Passover. We can't go into Pilate's house. We have to stand outside because that would make us unclean. We need to get this over with, this false trial, because we have our religious duties we have to take care of. And what we see in these first few verses we're reading is just the rotten fruit of false religion. The rotten fruit of false religion. These people are highly religious, spiritual, and devout. Highly. You look at today, those in the Christian church, and if we looked at the people we would consider the most devout, the most disciplined, we don't hold a candlestick to these people. Everything about their lives was discipline, discipline, discipline. Centuries before this, they knew that God had judged the nation of Israel for worshiping idols, not worshiping God in the way he had told them to worship him. In fact, it's so bad that when you go through the books, the historical books in the Old Testament, there's even a time where in the temple, they find the book of the law. And it hadn't been read in like a generation. And so they just started reading it and realized like, whoa, we are not following God at all. At all. Because their ancestors went into captivity in Babylon and were judged by God for not adhering to the law, they became incredibly strict with their law and their religion. And yet, it's a false religion. It's not one where these people are really going after God because they want to love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, mind, and the word there, strength. It means whatever is in you is what it means. It kind of means, right? They don't want to love their neighbors as themselves. They are following God because they want to love themselves as themselves. It's this thing where they're selfishly going after power, after fame, after money. And you see it right in here with the different things they say. I mean, John records, they themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled. They're assuming that the outwardness of their obedience is what matters and not looking at the fact that they have an innocent man before them. That they've arrested in the middle of night, had a trial that was completely illegal, not only against the law of God, but also against their own written laws that they had created. They're lying about him, and they're going to bring in false accusations, pay people to lie. But that doesn't matter because we need to do our religious duties. The word religion is something that has kind of become a bitter word, not only in our secular culture, but in the church. How many of you have ever heard or ever used the words yourself, I'm not about a religion, I'm about a relationship, or something to that effect? It's about a relationship, not a religion. Has anyone ever heard those words or phrases before? Yeah. We say that because we want to separate ourselves. But guys, religion isn't a bad thing. False religion is a bad thing. In fact, the word religion, it's a translation that we get from Greek into Latin, and then it's transliterated. It's two different words. What does re mean? Again, right? Again. And the last part of it, legere, read. Literally, it means to reread something. It means to go through something again. What are we doing here on this Sunday morning? Kind of the same pattern we did last Sunday morning. And what did we do last Sunday morning? Pretty much the same pattern we did the Sunday before that. We are rereading scripture that most of us have read before. We are returning to and going through once again the practices that we do as a church to bind us together through the Holy Spirit with God. And that's the last meaning of the word religion in Latin, to bind fast. It's the idea that we come together to be bound together with God and with each other as a church. Now, if I said, how many of you want to be religious, and that was the meaning, how many of you would want that, right? But it's false religion which drives that away. And it's rampant today. It's rampant today. We pride ourselves in churches like this about being Protestant or specifically about being evangelical. Brothers and sisters, there's a lot of corruption in the evangelical church today. A lot of corruption. If you look at it, there are story after story after stories coming out of pastors or churches falling apart because of sexual sin, because of handling money in ways that are illegal and unethical, or in being abusive, both physically and spiritually, emotionally, mentally, to the people in the church. It is all over the place. The largest Protestant denomination in our country just 2 weeks ago came out with a report, and it was horrifying. All of the sexual abuse of minors, rape, and just manipulation that was going on and was being hidden. People that have read and heard what was going on will say, wow, this looks like what happened with the Catholic Church a couple decades ago. Yeah, but it's evangelicalism now. We have a tendency to run after the church leaders that are hip, that are popular, things that look big, and not all of those are bad. But we are not that good as Christians today by judging people by their character, by their prayer life, by their relationship with the Lord himself. You look at it, and what we're seeing right here from these religious leaders, most of them Sadducees right here before Pilate, and we see the same kind of things happening today in the church of Jesus Christ. Brothers and sisters, be very careful who you follow. Be very careful who you follow. I love it a lot of times when you guys check me. I say a lot of times because there's always that one person that will check everything. But, it's one of those things where it's good to ask questions. It's good to come to me when I say something and say, like, I'm not sure if what you said right there is really accurate. A few weeks ago, I had a good friend of mine at church who came up to me after one of the services, and he said, hey, that was a great message, and I appreciate the way he came to me, by the way. He said, that was a great message. I really like this point here and that point there, and I'm thinking to myself, I made those points? And then he said, at the end of your sermon, you said this, and I know you, and I've been in our church for a long time, so I know what you meant. But there could possibly be somebody else that doesn't know you and would take what you meant as something very legalistic. I had to be like, okay, yeah, I could see that. I know what I meant. He knew what I meant. But someone that doesn't know me, yeah, that's going to sound pretty legalistic. And so I had to change what I said for the second service. I just had to adapt it and change. But I appreciate that I had this brother who was coming to me and not just accepting everything at face value, but able to say in a generous and gracious way, is this really what you meant? I don't think that's what you meant. And I was able to look at him and say, you're right. Guys, this is the rotten fruit of false religion. It's something that we always have to be on guard against. Moving on, we read the next section of this trial in verse 33. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or do others say it to you about me?" And Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests has delivered you over to me. What have you done?" And Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world." And then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" And Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And after he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him, but you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. Stop there for a minute. This interaction between Jesus and Pilate is pretty important to look at. Again, Pilate's trying to find out, like, who are you? What did you do? They're telling me that you're saying you're a king. But notice, Jesus is answering in such a way where it's not very threatening. He's like, if I am a king, it's not of this world. My kingdom is not of this world. And my followers aren't trying to overthrow you right now through violence because my kingdom's not of this world. That should have been comforting somewhat, probably a little confusing, especially with this otherworldly talk. Remember how I said that Pilate's wife didn't have a good night's sleep that night? It's because in a prophetic vision and dream, she had information given to her about the man that was going to be coming before Pilate. And she told her husband to have nothing to do with this. Like, she's saying, hey, there was a word of prophecy. And I'm telling you right now, husband, don't have anything to do with this trial or with that man. This is not going to end good for us. Pretty incredible. And you can imagine Pilate, just the tension he has going on. He has a man in front of him who's innocent. He has a crowd of seditious people outside of his house. He has a wife who evidently is a very spiritual person somehow, who's saying, hey, there's prophecies about this that have been given to me. Don't go there. Stay away. And he's stuck right in the middle. Jesus' words are incredible. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. And Pilate's response is heartbreaking. What is truth? Back in the 90s, when my dad was a pastor at Canby Christian Church, he used to do a thing every March. My dad likes puns, and rather than, it was a series of evening services that were meant to kind of lift up our faith, strengthen our faith. So instead of calling it a facelift, it was a faith lift, right? And we used to have these faith lifts. And there was one year in the late 90s when the gentleman who had been booked to come and speak for 5 services canceled, just like a couple of weeks before. And, we were scrambling trying to say, what should we do? So we contacted Multnomah University, Multnomah Bible College and Seminary in Portland, and they sent one of their professors down. His name was Ray Lubeck, Dr. Ray Lubeck. And it was fascinating in the late 90s. How many of you were there for that? Anybody? Okay, my parents. Oh, Nick and Kathy. That figures. Yeah, and if you remember, he had his slide projector. How many of you remember slide projectors? Yeah, wow. And on that, he had little drawings of a stick figure man called Joe, and specifically, he called him Pomo Joe. Pomo Joe. What did that stand for? Postmodern Joe. We were at a time, culturally and with our worldviews, where for centuries, you could categorize the West as being a modern mindset, a mindset that was about science, was about mathematics, a mindset that was very much into figuring everything out. It's the kind of culture that engineers and scientists and mathematicians thrive in, and the kind of culture that musicians go crazy in. It's this idea that, man, we're coming to this place in life where we are sophisticated, we're smart, we can explain everything, we know what truth is. But Dr. Lubeck explained to us that our culture and the worldview of the coming generation was shifting from modernism to postmodernism. And the biggest thing that identified postmodernism was that truth was relative. Truth was relative. So whatever you think is true for you, and that's fine, but I have my own truth. And at the time, that was scary for people that studied and watched those kinds of things. And all of the predictions have come true. All of them. Heck, let's go there. Culturally, what month is it? No, it's not June, it's Pride Month. Oh, yeah, some of you say. What is truth? And you look at what the Pride Month is about, and you start talking about truth, and truth is completely distorted from what we used to accept as true. Truth is now whatever you think or feel it is. And it's something that is absolutely scary to look at. The fact that in a recent Supreme Court nomination, a question was asked, can you define what a woman is? And someone with that type of law degree could not define it. Could not say it. I don't know. Really? I have grandsons that are 3 and 4 that are figuring out the differences. Okay? And it doesn't have to do with long hair versus short hair. This is something that you look at where we are going and where we are headed. We are in a cultural moment where truth is relative. We can look at it when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to identity, when it comes to racial issues. The fact that we are now grouping people purely by color of skin is absolutely wrong and ridiculous. Most of the things, when you hear the arguments being placed, it's not about skin color, it's about culture. It's about culture. Not all white people act the same way because we have different cultures. Not all black people act the same way because we have different cultures. Not all Hispanic people act the same way because they're not all Hispanic. It's this craziness that we've gotten to. You look at it in other ways. You ask some people today, when was the founding of our country? We're coming up on one of my favorite holidays. If I were to say, what's my second favorite holiday? All of my friends and family would be like, oh, for Tim, it's 4th of July. Yes! I can't wait to run around with sparklers in one hand and my flag in the other hand. I can't wait to barbecue. I can't wait to blow things up that night. It's going to be awesome because that's America. When was it founded? A lot of people now will say it's not 1776. We're in this moment where this reality is coming true for us. You look at this man, Pilate. Right before him is God himself. Right before him is the Messiah. Right before him is salvation. And what does he do? He questions, what is truth? What is truth? Brothers and sisters, there is truth. There is truth out there. And if we search for it, we can find it. And according to Jesus Christ, all truth is found in him. You want to know what's true with this world? You're not going to find it on the news. You're not going to find it on the internet. You're definitely not going to find it on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. You're going to find it in Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And you find him here in the Word of God. Dig in. Why do we do this week after week after week? Why do we have this religious ceremony where we bind ourselves together and we come before him and we study his word? It is because we want to know truth. And by that truth, we will be set free. Going on with the story, let's finish this out. And then we get to communion. Chapter 19, verse 1. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him with their hands. This process of Jesus being flogged by these soldiers, notice they're not just flogging him straight on. They're flogging him, and then they make a crown. They flog him. They put a robe on him. They flog him. They claim him to be King of the Jews and mock him. Why are they doing this? Because with the amount of stripes he took from that flog, if they had done one after another, he would have died. The Roman soldiers' practice was to only do 2, 3, or 4 flogs at a time and then stop, let the agony start to kind of calm down, the person catch their breath, and then it start again. And between each episode, they mocked and beat him more. Verse 4, Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you that you may know that I find no guilt in him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." And when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" And Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." And they answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God." And when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" And Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate is freaking out about this for multiple levels. One is that spiritual aspect that is going on here. This man is the Son of God. The other part of it is that Caesar Augustus claimed that title, that he was God. And it was Caesar Tiberius who then claimed to be the Son of God, the Caesar of this time. Now it's coming into direct conflict against Rome. Jesus gave him no answer, though. Like a sheep before its shearer is silent. I screwed that one up. You know what I'm talking about. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me. Do you not know that I have the authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" And Jesus answered him, "You have no authority over me at all, unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." Remember last week I said when the Roman soldiers came to arrest Jesus, Jesus said to them, "Who is it that you are looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And he replied, "I am." And at that, all of the soldiers were knocked backwards over on the ground. That kind of power, the power of God himself that spoke the world into existence. Why was Jesus silent? With one word, he could have ended all of this. With one word. And yet he went to the cross in full obedience and submission to the Father. Verse 12, from then on, Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, and in Aramaic, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, "Behold your king." And they cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" And Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" And the chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." And so he delivered him over to be crucified. The revealing power of the choices we make. These false religious leaders just made a choice, and it revealed, not only to the world at that time, but for the past 2,000 years, who their God really was. We have no king but Caesar. And with that, Jesus was sent to be crucified. This is horrifying. And next week, on Father's Day, unless I break for Father's Day, we're going to be looking at the crucifixion itself. It's horrific. Horrific what Jesus went through. And the people at this time had a choice who they would serve, who they would follow. And it became clear. They told the people around them their whole lives, we follow God. We're the people of God. We're the leaders of the people of God. But right here, right now, this is so revealing by the choice they made. No, we have no king but Caesar. They're not following God. They're following this world. And man, that's the thing. Throughout the Bible, we are confronted with a choice. Who are you going to follow? Let's not play games. Let's not play games. You could come here week after week after week and be the most faithful person to attend church. But are you really following Jesus Christ? You could be a person that is the biggest giver here in this church. I don't know. I don't know who that is. Maybe it's you. But are you really following Jesus Christ? Or is it for some other motive? Because you get a tax break. Because maybe somehow it leaks out that you gave and you want people to know you give. You could be someone who's a drummer, a worship leader, a preacher. Are we really choosing Christ, or are we doing these things for ourselves? I love Joshua 24 as the children of Israel are heading into the promised land. These words, "Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Brothers and sisters, that's my challenge to you today. Choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and the church I serve, we're serving the Lord.